The blood-red sunset painted Ruby Creek's Lone Street as Olivia Rose stepped onto the warped porch of the Gilded Lily Saloon, her fingers tracing the marks where her nails had gouged the wood during countless attempts to escape. 4 years in this prison was 4 years too many, and tonight the ledger in Vernon Pike's office showed she still owed him $300, a debt that seemed to grow rather than shrink no matter how many drinks she served or smiles she forced. The year was 1878, and Olivia had arrived in this dusty corner of Colorado territory with dreams as vast as the western sky. Now 23, she felt decades older, worn down by a life not of her choosing in this rough-hewn mining settlement nestled in a narrow valley where men came to find gold and women rarely found anything but trouble. "You're late," Vernon's voice sliced through the evening air. The saloon owner's thin frame blocked the doorway, his eyes cold as the creek that gave the town its name. At 45, Vernon Pike had the calculating gaze of a man who measured everything and everyone by their worth to him. "The miners from the South Ridge will be here soon. Get yourself presentable." Olivia nodded, her green eyes downcast as she slipped past him. His hand caught her wrist, tight enough to remind her of her place, but not enough to bruise Vernon never left marks where customers could see them. "And Olivia," he added, his breath hot against her ear, "Reynolds paid extra for your company tonight. Don't disappoint." A knot formed in her stomach. Harold Reynolds was one of the wealthiest claim holders in Ruby Creek, a man with wandering hands and a mean streak that emerged after his 5th whiskey. She'd managed to avoid his private attentions thus far, but Vernon was becoming increasingly insistent about additional services that went beyond serving drinks and laughing at crude jokes. "I won't be serving him that way," she said quietly, eyes fixed on a knot in the wooden floorboards. "That wasn't our arrangement." Vernon's laugh held no humor. "Arrangements change, girl. That debt of yours isn't paying itself, and I've been patient. Too patient, some might say. I serve drinks and I sing on Saturdays, nothing more." Olivia tried to keep her voice steady, though her heart hammered in her chest. His fingers dug deeper. "You do what I say you do. Your father sold your contract to me fair and square before he drank himself to death. You belong to the Gilded Lily until I say otherwise." The indentured servitude that had begun as a 6-month agreement had somehow stretched into years of captivity. Vernon controlled everything: where she slept, what she ate, when she spoke. Her small room above the saloon might as well have been a cell, and Ruby Creek a prison yard she couldn't escape. The few times she tried to run, Vernon's men had dragged her back and the punishments had taught her caution. Vernon released her with a shove toward the back stairs. 1 hour. Be downstairs and be smiling. Olivia climbed to her cramped quarters, fighting tears that wouldn't help her situation. A cracked mirror reflected a face she sometimes failed to recognize, still pretty enough to draw men's eyes, but with shadows beneath her own that spoke of extinguished hopes. Her auburn hair, once her pride, hung limp around pale features. She'd grown thin in Vernon's care, surviving on whatever scraps he deemed sufficient for a girl who owed him. As she washed her face in the basin of tepid water, she heard the saloon's batwing doors swing open below, followed by the heavy tread of boots. The evening crowd was arriving early. She changed into the blue dress Vernon insisted she wear, cut lower than she'd prefer, but one of only 3 he'd provided her. The dress caught on her wrist, revealing the rope scars from the time she'd tried to flee across the mountain pass. Vernon had kept her tied to a post in the storeroom for 3 days afterward, a lesson in ownership that had almost broken her. Almost. With practiced motions, she pinched her cheeks for color and bit her lips to redden them. No rouge or powder for Pike's girls. He claimed men preferred natural beauty, though Olivia suspected it was merely his miserly nature. She loosened her hair from its simple knot, letting it fall as Vernon demanded, and squared her shoulders. Downstairs, the saloon was already filling with miners and cattlemen. The scents of whiskey, tobacco, and unwashed bodies mingled in the hazy air. A piano player pounded out a cheerful tune that contrasted with the desperation Olivia felt. She moved automatically to her place behind the bar, where Hattie, another of Vernon's investments, was already pouring drinks with mechanical efficiency. "Reynolds is at his usual table," Hattie whispered as they passed. "Pike's been telling him all evening you'll be joining him later." Olivia's hands trembled slightly as she arranged glasses on a tray. "I can't, Hattie." The older woman's eyes flashed with sympathy before hardening. "Then you better find a way out before closing time. Pike gave Reynolds a key to your room." Cold dread settled in Olivia's stomach as she scanned the room. Reynolds sat in the corner, his meaty hand wrapped around a whiskey glass, eyes already tracking her movements. Vernon stood by the piano, deep in conversation with the town's so-called banker, who ran his business out of a trunk and charged interest rates that kept most minors in perpetual debt. As the evening progressed, Olivia moved through her duties like a ghost, smiling automatically, dodging wandering hands with practiced ease, all while watching the clock with growing anxiety. Reynolds drank steadily, his gaze becoming more predatory with each glass. Vernon occasionally caught her eye, his silent warning clear. She was refilling the bowl of hard-boiled eggs, the Gilded Lily's only concession to providing food, when the batwing doors swung open and a hush fell over the room. Olivia turned, curious about what could silence even the rowdiest minors. A man stood in the doorway, backlit by the dying sunset, tall and broad-shouldered in a way that suggested strength rather than bulk. As he stepped into the light, she noted his features' strong jaw darkened with stubble, eyes the color of a summer storm, and light brown hair that curled slightly beneath his hat. Dust covered his clothes, marking him as a traveler, but he carried himself with a quiet confidence rare in these parts. The stranger surveyed the room before approaching the bar, his spurs making a gentle jingling sound against the floorboards. Up close, Olivia could see the fine lines around his eyes, a man in his early 30s, perhaps with the weathered look of someone who lived under open skies. "Whiskey," he said, his voice low and resonant. "Whatever's least likely to blind me." Despite herself, Olivia smiled as she reached for the slightly better bottle Vernon kept for special customers. "That would be this one, though I make no promises." The stranger's lips quirked. "Honest bartending, rare in these parts." "Not bartending by choice," she replied before catching herself. Vernon had strict rules about chatting with customers beyond what was necessary to keep them drinking. The stranger studied her face, his gaze lingering on her eyes in a way that felt different from the usual appraisal she received. He seemed to be looking at her rather than through her or at what she might provide. "I'm Adam Forrester," he said, placing coins on the counter more than the drink was worth. When she reached for change, he shook his head. "Keep it." "Thank you, Mr. Forrester." She tucked the extra money into her pocket rather than the till, one of her small rebellions. "Just Adam," he corrected, taking his glass. Their fingers brushed, and Olivia felt an unexpected jolt at the contact. Adam's hand was calloused but gentle, his skin warm against her perpetually cold fingers. She withdrew quickly, aware of Vernon's watchful gaze from across the room. Adam took his drink to an empty table with a clear view of both the door and the room, sitting with his back to the wall, the habit of a man accustomed to trouble. His presence seemed to change the atmosphere in the saloon. Several of the rougher patrons quieted their boasting, and even Reynolds appeared less enthusiastic about his evening plans. Vernon sidled up to the bar, his voice a dangerous whisper. "Reynolds is waiting. Go sit with him." "Vernon, please," she began. "Now." His fingers dug into her arm as he guided her forcefully toward Reynolds' table. "And remember your debt." Harold Reynolds grinned as she approached, patting the seat beside him with a meaty hand. His face was flushed with alcohol, his small eyes gleaming with anticipation. Olivia's skin crawled as she perched on the edge of the chair, maintaining as much distance as possible. "Been waiting all night for your company, Miss Olivia," Reynolds slurred, his hand immediately finding her knee under the table. "Pike says you're finally ready to be more hospitable." Olivia shifted away, her smile stiff. "I'm afraid Mr. Pike misunderstood." "I'm happy to bring you drinks, Mr. Reynolds, but nothing more." Reynolds' expression darkened. "That's not what I paid for." His fingers tightened on her leg from across the room. Olivia caught Adam Forrester's gaze. The stranger watched their exchange with narrowed eyes, his posture shifting slightly, becoming more alert. She looked away quickly, not wanting to involve anyone else in her troubles. Men who interfered with Vernon's business had a habit of finding themselves in unfortunate accidents. For the next hour, she endured Reynolds' increasingly bold advances, deflecting as best she could while Vernon watched with thinly veiled impatience. When Reynolds suggested they continue upstairs, Olivia stood abruptly, claiming she needed to help at the bar. Vernon intercepted her halfway across the floor. "You're testing my patience," he hissed. "I won't do it," she whispered fiercely. "I'd rather you beat me again." Vernon's smile was cold. "That can be arranged, along with other consequences." His gaze drifted meaningfully to Hattie, who had once been Olivia's ally in escape attempts until Vernon had made an example of her. The older woman now walked with a limp, her spirit broken. "You have 10 minutes to get back to Reynolds," Vernon continued. "Or I'll consider your debt due in full, immediately. I'm sure the miners' camp is always looking for women to launder and cook. Of course, without my protection, who knows what might happen to a pretty girl like you out there." He released her arm and turned away, confident in his control. Olivia stood frozen. The walls of her cage seemed to close in. 10 minutes to decide between two versions of hell. She moved mechanically back to the bar, her mind racing through options that didn't exist. Hattie gave her a sympathetic glance before turning away. They both knew there was no help coming. Olivia poured herself a shot of the raw whiskey, something Vernon forbade his girls but which she desperately needed. As the liquid burned down her throat, she became aware of someone beside her. Adam Forrester leaned against the bar, his glass empty. "Another, if you would." His voice startled her from her thoughts. She reached for the bottle, conscious of how her hands trembled. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. The simple question asked with what seemed like genuine concern nearly undid her. When was the last time anyone had inquired about her well-being? "Fine," she responded automatically, the lie bitter on her tongue. Adam's eyes, clear and perceptive, saw through the pretense. "That man's bothering you, the one in the corner." "It's nothing I can't handle," she said, though they both knew it for the falsehood it was. "And the owner, the thin fellow watching you like a hawk." Olivia's eyes darted to Vernon, who was engrossed in conversation with the card dealer but still glanced her way every few moments. "That's my employer, Mr. Pike." Adam took a slow sip of his whiskey. "Employers don't usually leave bruises like the ones on your wrist." Instinctively, she tugged her sleeve down. "It's complicated." "Usually is," he agreed. "I've been watching. You're not here willingly, are you?" The direct question startled her. Most people in Ruby Creek knew Vernon's girls weren't there by choice, but no one questioned the arrangement. It was simply how things were done in mining towns, where women were scarce and men with money made the rules. "I have a debt," she said finally, keeping her voice low. "Until it's paid, I work for Mr. Pike. A debt that never seems to get smaller, I'd wager." Adam's voice held no judgment, only understanding that suggested he'd seen similar situations before. Olivia glanced at Reynolds, who was becoming visibly impatient, then at the clock. 5 minutes remained of Vernon's ultimatum. "I should go." Adam's hand caught hers, gentle but firm. "What's your name?" "Olivia. Olivia Rose." "Well, Olivia Rose," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "you don't have to go back to that table. You're free starting tonight." The words hit her like a physical force, free. A concept so foreign she almost couldn't comprehend it. "You don't understand. He'll never let me go." "I understand better than you might think." Adam's eyes held a history of their own. "I've seen too many women trapped in arrangements like yours. I'm offering a way out." Hope dangerous, fragile hope flickered in her chest. "Why would you help me?" "You don't even know me." Adam's gaze was steady. "Because no one should be owned by another person, not in this country, not anymore." Olivia glanced toward Vernon, who was now watching them with narrowed eyes. "He'll come after me, he always does. Let him try." The quiet confidence in Adam's voice wasn't bravado, it was the certainty of a man who knew his own capabilities. "Miss Rose." Vernon's voice cut through their conversation as he approached the bar. "Mr. Reynolds is waiting." Olivia froze, caught between fear and the tantalizing promise of freedom. Adam straightened beside her, his posture shifting subtly. "Miss Rose is busy," Adam said calmly. Vernon's thin lips curved into an insincere smile as he assessed the stranger. "I don't believe we've met." "Vernon Pike, proprietor of the Gilded Lily, and you are," Adam Forrester, "just passing through." "Well, Mr. Forrester, while you're passing through my establishment, you should know that Miss Rose works for me, and right now she has other obligations." Adam's expression remained neutral, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Seems to me the lady doesn't want to fulfill those particular obligations." The saloon had quieted, the patrons sensing the tension building between the two men. Even the piano player had slowed his tune, watching the exchange with interest. Reynolds stood, swaying slightly as he approached. "What's the holdup, Pike?" he demanded. "I paid good money for her company." Olivia flinched at being discussed like merchandise. Adam noticed, his jaw tightening. "The lady isn't for sale," he said evenly. Reynolds puffed up. "Who the hell are you to say what Pike does with his own property?" "She's not property," Adam replied, his voice carrying through the now silent saloon. "Those days ended at Appomattox." Vernon's face darkened. "This is a private business matter, Mr. Forrester. Miss Rose owes me a considerable sum. Until it's paid, she works for me under conditions I determine." Adam reached into his coat and withdrew a leather wallet. "How much?" Vernon blinked, momentarily thrown. "Pardon, her debt." "How much is it?" Vernon named a figure nearly double what Olivia knew to be true. $350, plus interest." Adam didn't flinch at the sum. He counted out bills, laying them precisely on the bar top. 500. That should cover the interest and buy the lady's contract outright. The saloon erupted in murmurs. Olivia stared at the money in disbelief. It was more than most miners saw in a year. Vernon's eyes gleamed with greed, but suspicion quickly followed. "Why would you pay that much for a girl you just met?" "I'm not paying for her," Adam clarified, his voice hard. "I'm settling her debt so she can make her own choices. There's a difference." Reynolds stepped forward, his face flushed with anger and wounded pride. "Now wait just a minute." Pike promised something that wasn't his to give," Adam interrupted, his hand moving casually to rest near his holstered revolver. "Find yourself another amusement, friend." The warning in his voice was unmistakable. Reynolds, despite his drunken bravado, recognized the look of a man who wouldn't be intimidated. He backed away, muttering curses. Vernon's calculating gaze moved between the money and Adam's resolute expression. Olivia could see him weighing options, the certainty of the cash against the potential profit she represented. Greed won out, as it always did with Vernon Pike. "Well," Vernon said, gathering the bills with nimble fingers, "it seems Miss Rose's debt is indeed settled." He tucked the money away and turned to Olivia with a cold smile. "You're free to go, my dear, though I imagine Ruby Creek holds limited opportunities for a woman of your specific talents." The veiled threat wasn't lost on her. Without Vernon's protection, she would be vulnerable in a town where unattached women were rare and valued only for certain purposes. "She won't be staying in Ruby Creek," Adam said, answering for her. Vernon's eyebrows rose. "Taking her with you, then? Perhaps I undercharged." Adam's expression hardened, but he kept his voice level. "Miss Rose's plans are her own. I merely settled an unjust debt." Vernon's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Very noble. We'll see how long nobility lasts on the frontier." He gave Olivia a final, assessing look. "Your belongings are, of course, yours to take. I'll expect your room cleared by morning." With that, he turned away, already focusing on his other profitable ventures, dismissing Olivia as if she'd never mattered at all. Perhaps to him, she never had. The saloon gradually returned to its normal volume, though many patrons cast curious glances their way. Olivia stood frozen, unable to fully process what had just happened. After 4 years of captivity, her chains had been struck off in a matter of minutes by a stranger with storm-gray eyes. "Did you mean it?" she finally asked, her voice barely audible above the renewed piano music. Am I truly free? Adam's expression softened. Yes, your debt is paid. Whatever happens next is your decision. I don't know what to do, she admitted, the vastness of possibility suddenly overwhelming after years of having every moment dictated by Vernon's whims. You don't have to decide everything tonight, Adam assured her, but you should probably gather your things. Pike strikes me as the type to change his mind if the price is right. Olivia nodded, reality beginning to set in. I don't have much, just some clothes and a few keepsakes. I'll wait here, Adam offered. Make sure no one interferes. Gratitude welled within her, along with wariness born from hard experience. Why are you helping me, truly? What do you want in return? Adam considered her question, seeming to understand the skepticism that 4 years under Vernon's control had instilled. Nothing, he said finally. I've seen too many people trapped in situations they can't escape alone. Sometimes all that's needed is someone willing to open the door. His sincerity was unlike anything she'd encountered in Ruby Creek, where every kindness came with expectations attached. Still cautious but desperately hoping he spoke truth, Olivia nodded and made her way upstairs to collect her meager possessions, her room if the tiny space could be called that held little she cared to take. She quickly gathered her clothes, folding them into a small bundle. From beneath the thin mattress, she retrieved her most precious possessions. A silver locket containing a curl of her mother's hair, a worn copy of Jane Eyre that had been her companion through countless lonely nights, and a small pouch containing the few coins she'd managed to hide from Vernon over the years, nowhere near enough for escape, but a small act of defiance nonetheless. As she worked, the reality of her situation began to sink in. She was free, or at least free of Vernon, but what did that mean? She had no family, no home, nowhere to go. The money Adam had paid wouldn't last forever, and she had few skills beyond those she'd learned at the Gilded Lily. The thought of trading one form of servitude for another made her stomach clench. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She tensed, expecting Vernon or perhaps Reynolds making one final attempt, but it was Hattie who entered, her tired face showing a mix of concern and hope. "Is it true?" the older woman asked. "You're really leaving?" Olivia nodded, continuing to gather her things. "He paid my debt, all of it." Hattie sat heavily on the bed, wincing slightly as her bad legs straightened. "Who is he? Do you know him?" "No, he's just a good man, I think." Even saying it felt strange after years of knowing so few, Hattie's expression turned worried. "Be careful, Livy. Men don't usually pay that kind of money without expecting something in return." "I know," Olivia agreed, "but I don't think he's like that, and even if he is." She trailed off, considering, "At least I'll have a choice this time." Hattie reached out, clasping Olivia's hand. "I'll miss you, but I'm glad you're getting out." Tears pricked Olivia's eyes as she embraced the woman who'd been her only friend in this place. "Come with me," she whispered impulsively. Hattie shook her head, pulling back. "Pike would never let us both go, and my leg." She gestured to the permanent damage from her own escape attempt. "I wouldn't get far. No, this is your chance. Take it." With a final squeeze of Hattie's hand, Olivia gathered her bundle and took one last look around the room that had been her prison for 4 years. Nothing about it would be missed. Downstairs, she found Adam waiting by the bar, his posture relaxed but alert. Several patrons watched curiously as she approached, bundle in hand. Vernon was nowhere to be seen, though Reynolds glared from his corner table, his pride still smarting. "Ready?" Adam asked simply. Olivia nodded, though in truth she felt anything but ready. The unknown stretched before her, exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. They stepped out into the cool night air, the sounds of the saloon fading behind them. The main street of Ruby Creek was quiet now, most activity centered around the saloons and gambling houses. Stars glittered overhead in a vast canopy, reminding Olivia how rarely she'd been allowed outside after dark. "I have a room at the boarding house," Adam said, gesturing down the street. "Mrs. Hemings runs a respectable place. I can arrange a separate room for you tonight, and tomorrow we can discuss your plans." The mention of separate rooms eased some of Olivia's tension. Perhaps Adam truly did expect nothing in return for his assistance. "Thank you," she said, the words inadequate for what he'd done. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Adam shook his head. It's not a debt, Olivia. It's a choice I made freely. As they walked toward the boarding house, Olivia felt Vernon's invisible chains beginning to loosen their hold. Each step took her further from the Gilded Lily and closer to a future she'd stopped believing possible. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in 4 years, tomorrow would be hers to shape, Mrs. Hemings, a stern widow with sharp eyes but a surprisingly gentle manner, raised her eyebrows when Adam requested a second room but asked no questions. She showed Olivia to a small but clean chamber with its own washbasin and a real bed luxuries after years in Vernon's cramped quarters. Breakfast at 7, the landlady informed her. No men in the rooms, no liquor, no carrying on. I run a decent house. Yes, madam, Olivia assured her. Thank you. When Mrs. Hemings departed, Adam lingered in the doorway. Will you be all right here? Olivia nodded, still somewhat dazed by the evening's events. I still can't believe this is happening. Get some rest, he suggested. Things often seem clearer in the morning. As he turned to leave, Olivia found her voice. Adam, who are you really? Why Ruby Creek? He paused, considering his answer. I track people sometimes when they need finding. Right now, I'm between jobs. He offered a small smile. As for Ruby Creek, it was just a stop on my way to Breckenridge. Seems it was a fortunate detour. Fortunate indeed, Olivia thought as she bid him good night. For the first time in years, she closed and locked a door herself, reveling in the simple power of that action. She washed in the basin, changed into her nightgown, and slipped beneath clean sheets that didn't carry the lingering scent of Vernon's cheap cologne. Sleep came surprisingly easily, and for once, she didn't dream of escape. There was no need, she was already free. Morning sunlight filtered through thin curtains, waking Olivia from the deepest sleep she'd experienced in years. For a moment, disorientation gripped her as she took in unfamiliar surroundings. Then memory returned. Adam, the confrontation, Vernon accepting payment for her debt. Freedom. She dressed quickly in her simplest dress, arranging her hair in a modest style that felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. Vernon had always insisted she wear it loose, like a proper saloon girl. Each pin she slid into place was a small act of self-determination. At breakfast, she found Adam already seated at Mrs. Hemings' dining table, along with 2 traveling salesmen and an elderly couple. The normalcy of the scene, respectable people sharing a meal, treating her like one of them rather than Vernon's property, felt surreal. Good morning, Adam greeted her, standing as she approached the table. The simple courtesy nearly brought tears to her eyes. Good morning, she replied, taking the seat he held for her. Mrs. Hemings served a hearty breakfast of eggs, biscuits, and coffee, more food than Vernon had allowed her in a week. Olivia ate slowly, savoring each bite, conscious of Adam's occasional glance but grateful he didn't press her with questions while others were present. After breakfast, he suggested a walk, and they set out along Ruby Creek's main street. In daylight, the town revealed its true nature, a hasty collection of buildings thrown up to service the mines, with little thought for permanence or beauty. Men already stumbled from saloons where they'd spent the night, while storekeepers swept their porches and freight wagons rattled past. Did you sleep well? Adam asked as they walked. Better than I have in years, she admitted. Thank you for that, for all of this. He nodded, seeming to understand what the simple comfort of a safe room meant to her. Have you thought about what you'll do now? The question that had hovered at the edges of her mind since last night now demanded consideration. I'm not sure, she confessed. I have little money of my own and few skills that would earn me respectable employment. What would you like to do if choice were no obstacle? The question startled her. What would she like? Vernon had controlled her for so long that her own desires had become distant memories, irrelevant to daily survival. I used to dream of teaching, she said finally. Before my father's debts led me here, I had some schooling and I've always loved books. She laughed softly, embarrassed by the admission. It seems foolish now. Not at all, Adam replied. Teaching's honorable work and always needed out here. They paused at the edge of town where the single street gave way to the rugged landscape beyond. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still snow-capped despite the summer warmth. "I'm heading to Breckenridge," Adam said after a moment. "It's a more established town than this place, has a proper school, church, even a newspaper. There might be opportunities for you there." Hope flickered briefly before caution dampened it. "I couldn't ask you to take me with you. You've done more than enough already." "I'm offering, not being asked," he clarified. "The trail can be dangerous for a woman traveling alone. I'd see you there safely, help you get settled if you'd like." Olivia studied him, searching for hidden motives in his expression. She found only sincerity in those storm-gray eyes. "Why would you do that?" she asked again, still unable to fully trust such generosity. Adam was quiet for a moment, gazing toward the mountains. "My sister was in a situation not unlike yours once," he finally said. "In a mining town up north. By the time I found her, it was too late." Pain flashed across his features before he controlled it. "I couldn't help her. Maybe I can help you." The simple, tragic explanation made sense of his actions in a way nothing else could. This wasn't about her specifically. She represented a second chance, an opportunity to right a wrong he couldn't change. "I'm sorry about your sister," she said softly. He nodded acknowledgement. "So, Breckenridge." "It's a 2-day ride from here." The decision seemed both monumental and surprisingly easy. Ruby Creek held nothing for her but painful memories and Vernon Pike's lingering influence. "Yes," she agreed. "Breckenridge." Adam's smile warmed his features. "Good, we can leave tomorrow morning." "I'll arrange for horses and supplies today." They were making their way back toward the boarding house when a familiar figure stepped from the general store ahead. Vernon Pike adjusted his hat as he spotted them, his thin lips curving into an insincere smile. "Miss Rose," he called, approaching with the smooth confidence of a man accustomed to controlling others. "Out enjoying your newfound freedom, I see." Olivia tensed, instinctively stepping closer to Adam. "Mr. Pike." Vernon's gaze slid to Adam, assessing. "Mr. Forrester." "I trust you're finding Ruby Creek hospitable?" "Hospitable enough," Adam replied neutrally. Vernon returned his attention to Olivia. "I wanted to inform you that there's been a slight oversight regarding our business arrangement. It seems in the confusion last night, I miscalculated the full extent of your debt." Ice formed in Olivia's stomach as Vernon continued. "The $500 covered your basic debt, of course, but there are other considerations: room and board over the years, clothing provided, medical attention when needed. By my accounting, you still owe approximately $200. Adam's expression hardened. "That wasn't the agreement." Vernon spread his hands in a gesture of false regret. "Business is business, Mr. Forrester. Miss Rose signed a contract when she came into my employment. I'm simply adhering to its terms." "Show me this contract," Adam demanded. "It's at my office. I'd be happy to review it with you there." Vernon's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, if Miss Rose wishes to return to her position at the Gilded Lily, I'm sure we could work out an accelerated payment schedule." The implication was clear. Vernon had no intention of letting her go, regardless of what Adam had paid. He'd simply find new debts to keep her bound to him. Adam stepped forward, his voice dropping to ensure only Vernon could hear. "I paid your price. Miss Rose is free of any obligation to you. If you continue this harassment, you'll find my patience has limits." Something in his tone must have conveyed more than the words themselves, because Vernon's confident smile faltered momentarily. He recovered quickly, adjusting his coat with exaggerated care. "No harassment intended, Mr. Forrester, merely a business matter." His gaze shifted to Olivia. "Do consider my offer, Miss Rose. Ruby Creek can be unfriendly to women without proper employment." With that, he tipped his hat and continued down the street, leaving Olivia trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. "He won't stop," she said quietly once Vernon was out of earshot. "He'll find ways to interfere as long as I'm here." Adam nodded grimly. "All the more reason to leave tomorrow." "Can you be ready by dawn?" "I've been ready to leave this place for 4 years," she replied with newfound determination. Whatever fears she had about the journey ahead paled compared to the prospect of falling back into Vernon's control. They spent the remainder of the day preparing for departure. Adam purchased supplies while Olivia acquired a few necessary items: sturdier boots, a warm shawl for mountain evenings, and a wide-brimmed hat to shield her fair skin from the summer sun. She was conscious of using Adam's money, adding mentally to the debt she owed him despite his insistence it wasn't a loan. That evening, as they sat on the boarding house porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in brilliant hues, Olivia voiced the concern that had troubled her throughout the day. "What if Vernon tries to stop us from leaving?" Adam considered the question seriously. "He might," he acknowledged. "Pike strikes me as a man who doesn't like losing what he considers his property. But we'll be leaving early, and I doubt he's an early riser after a night at the saloon." He was right about that. Vernon rarely emerged before noon, spending his mornings recovering from the previous night's excesses. Still, the prospect of confrontation left Olivia uneasy. "I should tell you," Adam added, "I'm not just going to Breckenridge for pleasure. I'm tracking a man named Wilson who robbed a bank in Denver. There's a reward for his capture." Olivia absorbed this information. "You're a bounty hunter then?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "When the cause is just." Wilson shot a teller during the robbery, a young woman who left behind 2 small children. The law hasn't caught up with him yet. The revelation should perhaps have alarmed her, but instead, Olivia found it oddly reassuring. Adam's profession explained his confidence when confronting Vernon, as well as the quiet authority he projected. "Will my presence complicate your work?" she asked. Adam shook his head. "Wilson's not likely to be dangerous unless cornered, and Breckenridge is just where I'm picking up his trail. My business there shouldn't take more than a day." As darkness settled over Ruby Creek, they retired to their respective rooms with plans to meet before dawn. Olivia packed her few belongings, her mind alternating between excitement at the journey ahead and anxiety about what awaited in Breckenridge. Would she find the fresh start she hoped for, or merely trade one form of struggle for another? Sleep proved elusive, her thoughts repeatedly returning to Vernon and his thinly veiled threats. What if he was watching the boarding house? What if he intercepted them before they could leave town? The possibilities multiplied in the darkness, each more disturbing than the last. A soft knock at her door startled her, fully awake. Fear spiked through her. Had Vernon come after all? She reached for the heavy candlestick on her bedside table, the only weapon available. "Olivia?" Adam's voice came through the door, pitched low to avoid disturbing other guests. "Are you awake?" Relief flooded through her as she opened the door to find Adam fully dressed, his expression grave. "What's wrong?" she asked, noting the tension in his posture. "One of Pike's men is watching the boarding house," he explained quietly. "And there's talk in town that Pike's claiming you stole from him before leaving the Gilded Lily." Olivia's blood ran cold. "That's a lie. I took nothing but my own belongings." "I know," Adam assured her, "but Pike has influence here and the sheriff owes him favors." "If they decide to believe him, they could arrest me," she finished, understanding immediately. False accusations were a common tactic used against women who tried to escape situations like hers. Once in jail, Vernon would ensure she had no choice but to accept his protection again. "We need to leave now," Adam continued. "Can you be ready in 5 minutes?" Olivia nodded, already reaching for her bundle. "I never really unpacked." True to her word, she was ready quickly, dressed in her sturdiest clothes with her hair braided securely. Adam led her quietly down the back stairs of the boarding house, avoiding the creaky 3rd step she'd noticed earlier. A note and payment for Mrs. Hemings lay on the dining room table. Adam thought of everything. They slipped out through the kitchen door into the alley behind the boarding house. The night was clear, stars providing enough light to navigate by once their eyes adjusted. Adam led her to a small stable where 2 horses waited, already saddled. "The bay is yours," he whispered, helping her mount. "She's gentle but sure-footed. Follow my lead and stay close." Olivia hadn't ridden in years, not since before her father's death, but the familiar motions returned quickly. They kept to back alleys until they reached the edge of town, avoiding the main street where Vernon's man might be watching. As they passed the last buildings and the trail opened up before them, Olivia felt a surge of exhilaration. For the first time in 4 years, she was truly leaving Ruby Creek behind. Whatever lay ahead, she was moving toward it of her own choice, her own free will. The trail climbed steadily into the foothills, winding through stands of pine and aspen. Adam set a brisk pace, clearly hoping to put substantial distance between them and Ruby Creek before full daylight. Olivia followed without complaint, despite the growing ache in muscles unaccustomed to riding. When the sun finally crested the eastern mountains, painting the landscape in golden light, they paused at a high point to rest the horses and survey the path behind them. Ruby Creek was visible in the valley below, smoke beginning to rise from morning fires. No pursuers were visible on the trail, but Adam remained watchful. "Do you think they'll follow?" Olivia asked, accepting the canteen he offered. Adam considered the question. "Pike struck me as determined but practical. The question is whether his pride outweighs his business sense. Following us means leaving his saloon, possibly for days." Olivia knew Vernon well enough to assess the likelihood. "He might send someone else," she suggested. "He has men who do his dirty work." "Then we'll remain alert," Adam replied simply. "But we have a good head start, and I know these mountains better than most." They continued throughout the day, following a trail that grew increasingly rugged as it wound higher into the mountains. Adam proved to be a patient teacher, offering advice on riding techniques that eased Olivia's discomfort. They spoke little at first, focusing on the journey, but as the hours passed and Ruby Creek fell further behind, conversation began to flow more naturally. Adam told her about his life raised on a small ranch in Wyoming, service in the latter years of the Civil War when he was barely 18, and the varied paths he'd followed since. He spoke of tracking outlaws, guiding expeditions, and occasionally serving as a lawman in towns too small or too wild to attract permanent sheriffs. In turn, Olivia shared parts of her own story, her childhood in Missouri, with educated parents who valued books and learning, her father's gambling problems that worsened after her mother's death, and finally his desperate arrangement with Vernon Pike that had consigned her to 4 years of servitude. "He truly believed it would only be 6 months," she explained as they stopped to water the horses at a clear mountain stream. "He thought his luck would change, that he'd win enough to pay Vernon back and bring me home." "What happened to him?" Adam asked gently. Olivia trailed her fingers through the cold water, watching ripples spread outward. "Pneumonia, according to the letter Vernon showed me, though I've often wondered if Vernon had a hand in his death. It would have been convenient no one to challenge my continued employment once the original term ended." Adam didn't dismiss her suspicion as fanciful, which she appreciated. He understood the kind of man Vernon Pike was. As evening approached, they reached a small plateau nestled among towering pines. A rudimentary cabin stood at its edge, little more than a shelter with walls and a roof, but a welcome sight nonetheless. "Trappers use it in winter," Adam explained as they dismounted. "But it should be empty this time of year." The cabin was indeed abandoned, its interior dusty but sound. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, and rough-hewn bunks lined another. Adam quickly set about gathering wood while Olivia cleared away the worst of the dust and arranged their bedrolls. As darkness fell, they shared a simple meal of jerky, hard biscuits, and dried fruit beside a small fire. The mountain air turned chilly, and Olivia drew her shawl tighter around her shoulders, gazing into the flames. "You mentioned teaching," Adam said as he poured coffee into tin cups. "How did that dream begin?" The question warmed her almost as much as the fire. "How long had it been since anyone had asked about her dreams?" "My mother was a teacher before she married," Olivia explained. "She taught me at home until I was 12, then convinced my father I should attend a proper school. I loved learning history especially, and literature, the idea of sharing that with children." She trailed off, smiling at the memory of her younger self's ambitions. "What about you?" she asked, deflecting attention from dreams that still seemed improbable. "What does Adam Forrester want beyond the next bounty?" He considered the question seriously, turning his coffee cup in calloused hands. "Land, maybe, a place of my own. I've been wandering a long time." "No family waiting somewhere?" A shadow crossed his features. Not anymore. My parents died when I was young. My sister was all I had left, and after losing her. He shrugged, the gesture conveying years of solitary existence. Olivia understood loneliness intimately. After her father's death, she'd had no one, no family searching for her, no friends beyond Hattie and the other girls at the Gilded Lily who were trapped in similar circumstances. "Thank you," she said suddenly, meeting his gaze across the fire. "Not just for helping me escape, but for seeing me, truly seeing me. In Ruby Creek, I was just Pike's girl, property to be used. You're the first person in 4 years who's asked what I want." Adam's expression softened. Everyone deserves that much at least. Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of shared understanding that transcended their brief acquaintance. Olivia found herself noticing details she'd been too overwhelmed to properly observe before. The way firelight caught golden flecks in his gray eyes, how his smile began at one corner of his mouth before spreading, the gentle strength in hands that had known hard work yet helped her mount her horse with such care. They talked late into the night, the conversation flowing easily between them. Adam described places he'd seen that Olivia had only read about: the vastness of the Texas plains, the rugged beauty of Montana territories, the growing cities of the East. She shared her favorite books, surprised and pleased when he knew many of them. When they finally retired to their separate bedrolls on opposite sides of the cabin, Olivia fell asleep more quickly than she'd expected, lulled by the crackling fire and a sense of security she hadn't experienced in years. Morning brought clear skies and renewed determination to reach Breckenridge by nightfall. They set out early, following a trail that wound through spectacular mountain scenery, towering pines giving way to sweeping meadows vibrant with wildflowers, then climbing again through rocky passes where meltwater formed cascading streams. Adam pointed out landmarks as they traveled, teaching Olivia to read the landscape the way one might read a book. She proved an apt pupil, her natural intelligence sharpened by years of observing Vernon's moods and adapting accordingly. By midday, they paused at a high point overlooking a vast valley. In the distance, nestled along a river that glinted in the sun, lay their destination. "Breckenridge," Adam announced, gesturing toward the collection of buildings that formed a proper town rather than the haphazard arrangement of Ruby Creek. Olivia shaded her eyes, taking in the scene. Even from this distance, she could see evidence of civilization: a church steeple, streets laid in something resembling a grid, substantial buildings constructed with permanence in mind. "It's larger than I expected," she remarked. "Gold was discovered there in '59, Adam explained. "Unlike some mining towns, it's established itself as more than just a temporary camp. There's families now, businesses beyond saloons and gambling halls." As they descended toward the valley, Olivia's excitement mingled with apprehension. Breckenridge represented possibility, but also uncertainty. Her practical concerns resurfaced: where would she stay? How would she support herself? What place could she make for herself in this new community? What will you do after you find this man you're tracking? She asked as they rode, curious about Adam's plans beyond delivering her safely to Breckenridge. He considered the question. "Collect the reward, most likely." Then, he shrugged. "Find another job, I suppose. You don't sound particularly enthusiastic about that prospect," she observed. Adam's lips quirked in a half-smile. "Maybe I'm growing tired of chasing other men's problems across the territory." The admission seemed to surprise him as much as her. For a moment, Olivia imagined suggesting he stay in Breckenridge, but quickly dismissed the thought. Adam had already done more than enough for her. She had no right to ask for more of his time or attention. As the afternoon progressed, they encountered more travelers on the trail, freight wagons heading to and from Breckenridge, miners seeking new claims, even a family in a loaded-down wagon, children peering curiously at them as they passed. Signs of civilization increased: split rail fences marking property boundaries, the occasional small farmstead carved from the wilderness. By late afternoon, they reached the outskirts of Breckenridge proper. Compared to Ruby Creek's single dusty street, The town seemed almost metropolitan. Wooden sidewalks lined the main thoroughfare. Proper storefronts displayed goods behind glass windows, and a surprising number of women and children moved about their business alongside the expected miners and merchants. "We should find you lodging first," Adam suggested as they rode slowly down the main street. "There's a respectable boarding house for women on the north side of town, run by a Mrs. Simmons, widow of a minister, if I recall correctly." The mention of respectable lodgings reminded Olivia of her precarious social position. In Ruby Creek, everyone had known her as Vernon's girl, her reputation determined by his ownership. Here in Breckenridge, she had an opportunity to establish herself anew, but the shadow of the Gilded Lily still clung to her. "You think she'll accept me?" Olivia asked quietly. "Given my history," Adam's expression turned serious. "Your history is your own, Olivia. You don't owe explanations to Mrs. Simmons or anyone else. As far as Breckenridge is concerned, you're simply a young woman seeking employment and lodging." His confidence bolstered her own as they approached a neat two-story house set slightly back from the street. A discreet sign identified it as Simmons Boarding House for Ladies, and flower boxes bloomed beneath each window, suggesting care and attention to detail. Mrs. Simmons proved to be a formidable woman of perhaps 60, with silver hair pulled into a tight bun and spectacles that magnified already perceptive eyes. She surveyed Olivia with undisguised assessment, while Adam explained that Miss Rose was new to Breckenridge and seeking accommodations while she established herself. "And what is your profession, Miss Rose, Mrs. Simmons inquired, her tone suggesting the answer would determine whether Olivia was acceptable for her establishment. "I hope to find work as a teacher," Olivia replied truthfully. "I have some education, though I would need to obtain proper references." Mrs. Simmons' expression softened marginally. "Teaching is a noble calling. We are fortunate to have a school here in Breckenridge, though I'm not certain they're seeking additional instructors at present." She turned her attention to Adam, her gaze sharpening again. "And you, sir? What is your relationship to Miss Rose?" "Mr. Forrester is a friend who kindly escorted me from Ruby Creek," Olivia interjected before Adam could reply. "The journey would have been unsafe for a woman traveling alone." Mrs. Simmons nodded approvingly at this sensible precaution. After further questioning that felt more like an interview than a business transaction, she agreed to rent Olivia a small but tidy room on the second floor, with meals included for a reasonable weekly rate. "I maintain certain standards in my house," she informed Olivia as she showed her to the room. "No gentlemen callers in private rooms, no spirits on the premises, and all residents must be in by 9 o'clock unless prior arrangements are made. Church attendance on Sundays is strongly encouraged." "I understand completely," Olivia assured her, privately thinking that, after Vernon's control, Mrs. Simmons' rules seemed almost liberating in their straightforward nature and equal application to all residents. With lodging secured, Adam accompanied Olivia to a general store where she purchased a few necessities with the small sum of money she'd managed to save during her years at the Gilded Lily. The shopkeeper's wife, a friendly woman named Mrs. Davis, proved to be a valuable source of information about Breckenridge. "If you're looking for employment, you might speak with Mr. Wilson at the Mercantile," she suggested. "His wife's expecting their third child any day now, and she's been managing their books. They could use an educated young woman to help, at least temporarily." By the time they stepped back onto the street, the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting Breckenridge in golden light. Adam walked Olivia back to the boarding house, their pace slowing as they approached, both seemingly reluctant for the day to end. "Will you be staying in Breckenridge long?" Olivia asked as they paused outside the white picket fence that bordered Mrs. Simmons' property. "A few days at least," Adam replied. "I need to make inquiries about Wilson, the man I'm tracking. Last reports placed him heading this way about a week ago." Olivia nodded, unsure what else to say. Thank you seemed woefully inadequate for all he'd done, yet anything more might suggest expectations she had no right to hold. "I'll call on you tomorrow," Adam offered, seeming to sense her uncertainty. "Help you get oriented to the town, if that would be welcome." "Very welcome," she assured him, warmth spreading through her at the thought of seeing him again. He tipped his hat with a smile that transformed his serious features, then turned toward the hotel where he'd arranged his own lodging. Olivia watched him go, aware of a curious emptiness his departure created, as if in the span of just 2 days, his presence had become something she relied upon. That night, in her small but private room at Mrs. Simmons' boarding house, Olivia lay awake considering the strange turn her life had taken. Less than 3 days ago, she'd been Vernon Pike's property, facing a future of continued servitude and eventual ruin. Now she was free, in a new town with possibilities stretching before her like the vast Colorado sky, and Adam Forrester, a man who'd entered her life as unexpectedly as a summer storm and changed everything with his simple declaration, "You're free starting tonight." What was he to her? Savior? Friend? Perhaps something more, given the way her pulse quickened when he smiled. She fell asleep contemplating these questions, her dreams for once free of Vernon Pike's controlling presence. The following days established a pattern that brought both stability and excitement to Olivia's new life. Each morning after breakfast at the boarding house, Adam would arrive to accompany her as she explored Breckenridge and sought employment. His own inquiries about the bank robber Wilson proceeded alongside her efforts, creating a shared purpose that strengthened their growing connection. On her 3rd day in town, Olivia secured a position at Wilson's Mercantile, just as Mrs. Davis had suggested. Mrs. Wilson, heavily pregnant and relieved to relinquish her bookkeeping duties, took an immediate liking to Olivia's quiet competence. The work wasn't teaching, but it utilized her education and paid well enough to cover her board with a small amount left for savings. "You have a natural head for figures," Mrs. Wilson commented after Olivia reorganized their chaotic ledger during her first afternoon. "My husband will be delighted." He's skilled with customers but hopeless with numbers. Adam, meanwhile, methodically visited saloons, the stagecoach office, and livery stables, building a picture of his quarry's movements. By their 5th evening in Breckenridge, as they shared a meal at the town's modest restaurant, he had news. "Wilson was here," he confirmed, keeping his voice low despite the privacy of their corner table. "Left 3 days before we arrived, heading north toward the high country. Word is he's meeting associates at an old mining camp about 20 miles from here." Olivia felt a pang of disappointment, knowing this meant Adam would soon depart. "When will you leave to find him?" "Tomorrow morning," he replied, studying her face with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "It shouldn't take more than a few days to locate him and bring him back to face charges in Denver." Olivia nodded, forcing a smile. "Of course, you have your job to complete." Adam seemed on the verge of saying more, but instead changed the subject to her work at the Mercantile. They spoke of trivial matters throughout the remainder of the meal, both avoiding acknowledgement of his imminent departure, as they walked back toward Mrs. Simmons' boarding house in the gathering twilight. Their hands occasionally brushed, sending sparks of awareness through Olivia despite the innocence of the contact. Adam had been unfailingly respectful since their arrival in Breckenridge, maintaining a careful distance that honored her newfound independence while making his interest clear through small attentions and genuine conversation. "Will you return to Breckenridge?" she asked as they approached the boarding house gate. "After you've captured Wilson?" Adam paused, turning to face her. In the lamplight from Mrs. Simmons' porch, his features were partially shadowed, but his eyes remained clear and direct. "Would you want me to?" The simple question cut through pretense. Olivia took a breath, finding courage to speak truth after years of calculated submission to Vernon's whims. "Yes," she said quietly, "I would like that very much." Adam's expression softened, and he reached out to take her hand. His touch was warm, calluses rough against her skin in a way that spoke of honest work rather than Vernon's soft, grasping fingers. "Then I'll return," he promised. "You have my word." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Olivia was acutely aware of Mrs. Simmons potentially watching from her front window, the boarding house matron maintained vigilant oversight of her residence propriety, but found herself caring less than she might have expected. Adam seemed similarly unconcerned with observers, as he raised her hand to his lips in a gesture that belonged more to a courtly romance than the Colorado frontier. The brief contact sent warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the mild summer evening. "Until I return," he said softly, releasing her hand with obvious reluctance. Olivia watched him walk away, her heart lighter than it had been in years despite the impending separation. He would come back. She believed that as surely as she believed in her own newfound freedom. The following week passed in a blur of work and adjustment to her new life. Olivia found unexpected satisfaction in her position at the Mercantile, where her intelligence was valued and her suggestions for improving their accounting system were welcomed with appreciation. Mrs. Wilson delivered a healthy son and named him Alexander, much to her husband's delight. The Wilsons proved to be more than just employers. They became friends who invited Olivia to Sunday dinner and introduced her to other respectable families in Breckenridge. Through these connections, she learned of an opportunity that rekindled her original dream. The school board is seeking an assistant teacher for the fall term, Mrs. Peterson, the banker's wife, informed her after church on Olivia's second Sunday in Breckenridge. "The children are so numerous now that poor Miss Jenkins can't manage them all. You mentioned having some education." Olivia's pulse quickened at the prospect. "Yes, I attended Miss Hartford's Academy for Young Ladies in St. Louis until I was 16, and my mother was a teacher who continued my education at home." "You should speak with Reverend Thomas," Mrs. Peterson suggested. "He chairs the school board." The Reverend proved receptive to Olivia's inquiry, especially when she demonstrated her knowledge of literature, mathematics, and history during an informal interview in his study. Her lack of formal teaching experience was balanced by the pressing need for qualified individuals in a frontier town where educated women were scarce. "The position won't begin until September," he explained, "but the salary is modest though fair, and the work is rewarding. We particularly need someone who can instruct the younger children in their letters and basic arithmetic, while Miss Jenkins focuses on the older students." Olivia left the meeting with provisional acceptance, contingent upon approval from the full school board at their next meeting. The joy she felt at this step toward her long-deferred dream was tempered only by Adam's continued absence. Each day, she found herself watching the road into town, hoping for his return. 9 days after his departure, her vigilance was rewarded. She was arranging a display of fabric bolts in the Mercantile's front window when a familiar figure on horseback caught her eye. Adam rode slowly down the main street, looking trail-worn but alert. Behind him, a second horse carried a man whose hands appeared to be bound to his saddle horn. Wilson, presumably. Olivia's heart leapt at the sight, though she maintained her composure as she completed her task. Only when Mr. Wilson appeared to take over the display did she request permission to take her midday break early. "Of course, Miss Rose," he agreed readily. "You've more than earned a few extra minutes of rest with all your improvements to our bookkeeping." She left the Mercantile just as Adam emerged from the sheriff's office, having apparently delivered his prisoner. He paused on the boardwalk, scanning the street until his gaze found her. The smile that spread across his face at the sight of her sent warmth flooding through Olivia despite the proper distance between them. They met in the middle of the street, both suddenly awkward after days of separation. "You're back," Olivia said unnecessarily, her hands clasped tightly before her to prevent herself from reaching for him in a way Mrs. Simmons would certainly disapprove. "As promised," Adam replied, his eyes taking in the sight of her with undisguised appreciation. "You look well." "As do you," she returned, though in truth he appeared exhausted, with several days' growth of beard shadowing his jaw and dust from the trail coating his clothes. Still, the weariness couldn't diminish the vital energy that seemed an essential part of him. "Have you eaten?" he asked. "I could use a meal that isn't my own poor cooking over a campfire," They repaired to the restaurant where they'd shared their last meal before his departure, finding the same corner table available. Once seated, Adam shared the details of his successful pursuit of Wilson, who had indeed been meeting Confederates to plan another robbery. "The Denver authorities are sending a wagon to collect him tomorrow," he explained between bites of the substantial meal he'd ordered. "The reward will be paid once he's delivered to the city jail." "And after that?" Olivia asked, the question that had occupied her thoughts for days finally finding voice. Adam set down his fork, meeting her gaze directly. "After that, I thought I might see about more permanent lodgings here in Breckenridge." Joy surged through her at this confirmation that his return wasn't temporary. "You're staying?" "If that's still welcome," he replied, his expression serious despite the warmth in his eyes. "It is," she assured him, unable to suppress her smile. "Very welcome." His answering smile transformed his trail-worn features. "Good, because I find myself increasingly disinclined to leave." The remainder of the meal passed in conversation about her own activities during his absence, her position at the Mercantile, the potential teaching opportunity, and her gradual integration into Breckenridge society under Mrs. Simmons' surprisingly helpful guidance. "She's strict but fair," Olivia explained as they walked back toward the Mercantile after their meal, "and having her voucher for my character has opened doors that might otherwise remain closed to a woman in my circumstances." Adam nodded, understanding. Frontier towns can be unforgiving of a woman's past, deserved or not, but Breckenridge seems more civilized than most. "It's becoming home," she admitted. "More than any place has been since my parents died." They paused outside the Mercantile, both reluctant to part despite the workday that awaited Olivia. Adam cleared his throat, suddenly showing uncharacteristic hesitation. "I wonder if you might permit me to call on you properly," he said finally, "with Mrs. Simmons' approval, of course." The formal request, so different from their hasty escape from Ruby Creek and subsequent travels, touched Olivia deeply. It represented recognition of her autonomy, her right to accept or decline his attention now that the immediate crisis of her captivity was past. "I would like that very much," she replied, warmth suffusing her face. His smile held promise of conversations yet to come, of a future unfolding according to their own choices rather than Vernon Pike's dictates or the necessities of the trail. Until this evening, then. Olivia returned to her work with renewed energy, her thoughts repeatedly straying to Adam despite her best efforts at concentration. Mr. Wilson noticed her distraction, but commented only with a knowing smile. News traveled quickly in Breckenridge, and Adam's return with his prisoner was already the talk of the town. That evening, Adam presented himself at Mrs. Simmons' door promptly at 7, freshly bathed and shaved, wearing clean clothes that transformed him from trail-worn bounty hunter to respectable gentleman caller. Mrs. Simmons subjected him to a polite but thorough interrogation about his background and intentions before permitting him to join Olivia in the front parlor, where other boarders and their approved visitors maintained the propriety of the establishment through their presence. Despite the lack of privacy, Olivia found the evening delightful. They spoke of books they'd both enjoyed, places Adam had seen that Olivia hoped to visit someday, and their respective plans for the future. His immediate intentions, he explained, involved collecting the reward for Wilson's capture and using it to establish himself more permanently. "I've had my eye on a parcel of land about 3 miles outside town," he admitted. "Good water, decent grazing, and enough timber for building. The current owner's heading back east and looking to sell quickly." "You mentioned wanting land of your own," Olivia recalled their fireside conversation during their journey. "For ranching," Adam nodded, "on a small scale at first. I've saved most of what I've earned over the years, and the Wilson reward would make it possible to start properly good stock, solid buildings." As he described his vision for the property, Olivia could see it taking shape in her mind, a comfortable home nestled among pines, horses grazing in mountain meadows, a life built on his own terms rather than following the demands of others. It was a compelling picture, made more so by the passion with which he painted it. Mrs. Simmons announced the end of visiting hours promptly at 9, her expression making clear that her rules applied equally regardless of how engaged her boarders might be in conversation. Adam took his leave with proper courtesy, but not before securing permission to escort Olivia to church the following morning. In the days that followed, Adam became a regular visitor at both the boarding house and the mercantile, where he occasionally appeared at midday to accompany Olivia on her dinner break. Their courtship for that was what it undeniably became progressed, with a combination of frontier practicality and genuine affection that suited them both. Adam completed the purchase of his land and began work on improving the existing cabin, often returning to town with evidence of his labor visible in new calluses and occasional minor injuries that Olivia tended with growing confidence. For her part, she secured the assistant teacher position after formal approval from the school board, with duties to begin when the fall term started in early September. 3 weeks after Adam's return to Breckenridge, as summer began its gradual transition toward autumn, he invited Olivia to visit his property on a Sunday afternoon following church. Mrs. Simmons, after initial reservations, agreed to the outing when Mrs. Wilson offered to chaperone, having developed genuine fondness for Olivia and evident respect for Adam's honorable conduct. The 3-mile journey from town provided Olivia's first real glimpse of the surrounding countryside since her arrival in Breckenridge. Adam pointed out landmarks as they traveled in the Wilsons' wagon, his pride in the region evident in every description. When they crested a small rise and the property came into view, Olivia understood why he'd been so drawn to this particular parcel. A natural clearing surrounded by towering pines provided space for the small cabin he'd been improving and the additional buildings he planned. A stream wound through one corner of the property, its banks lined with aspens that would turn golden in the coming weeks. Beyond the clearing, meadows stretched toward distant mountains still capped with snow despite the summer heat. "It's beautiful," she said simply as Adam helped her down from the wagon. His expression as he looked from the land to her face suggested he found beauty in both views. "It's a good beginning," he agreed. Mrs. Wilson, demonstrating tact that confirmed Olivia's high opinion of her, suggested her husband show her the stream while Adam gave Olivia a tour of the cabin's improvements. This provided a measure of privacy while maintaining propriety through the Wilsons' nearby presence. The cabin was small but solid, with a stone fireplace and 2 rooms, the main living area, and a smaller space that Adam explained would eventually be a proper bedroom once he'd completed more pressing improvements. He'd added a new roof, repaired the floor, and installed actual glass windows in place of the oiled paper that had previously served. "It's still rough," he acknowledged as Olivia explored the simple space, "but it's weather-tight for the coming winter and I can add refinements over time." Olivia ran her hand along a shelf he'd built beside the fireplace, noting the careful craftsmanship despite limited tools. "You've accomplished so much already." Adam watched her move through the space, his expression thoughtful. "It's still missing something essential: furniture," she suggested with a smile. The cabin contained only a table, 2 chairs, and a narrow bed pushed against one wall. "A woman's touch," he corrected quietly. "Your touch, specifically?" The simple statement, delivered without artifice, brought warmth to Olivia's cheeks. Before she could respond, he continued, "I know it's soon. We've known each other less than 2 months, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life." He closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. "Olivia Rose, from the moment I saw you in that saloon, something in me recognized something in you. I didn't save you from Pike, you were already saving yourself with every small resistance you maintained. I just opened a door you were ready to walk through." Tears pricked her eyes at his understanding of what those years of captivity had truly entailed, not just physical restriction, but constant internal struggle to maintain her sense of self against Vernon's attempts to break her spirit. "Since then," Adam continued, I've come to admire your resilience, your intelligence, and your kindness. I find myself wanting to build not just a ranch, but a life with you as its heart." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a simple gold band set with a small but clear diamond. "This was my mother's," he explained. "I've carried it for years, waiting for the right woman to give it to." Olivia's breath caught as he knelt before her, still holding her left hand. "Olivia Rose, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not because you need my protection or support, you've proven you can make your own way, but because together, we might build something finer than either of us could alone." Joy welled within her at both the proposal itself and the way he'd framed it, not as rescue or obligation, but as partnership between equals. In Vernon's world, women were possessions to be controlled. In Adam's vision, their vision, she would be a full participant in creating their shared life. "Yes," she said simply, her voice steady despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "Yes, I will marry you, Adam Forrester." His smile as he rose and slipped the ring onto her finger outshone even the brilliant Colorado sunshine streaming through the cabin windows. For a moment they stood there, hands clasped, future unfolding before them like the view from the cabin door. Their first kiss, when it came, held both tenderness and promise, the gentle beginning of a connection that would deepen throughout a lifetime together. Olivia felt in that moment a completion of the journey that had begun when Adam spoke those transformative words in the Gilded Lily. "You're free starting tonight." Freedom, she now understood, wasn't just absence of captivity. It was the presence of choice, of possibility, of love freely given and received. The Wilsons, returning from their tactful exploration of the stream, found them standing together on the cabin's small porch, hands still entwined. "Mrs. Wilson took one look at their faces and Olivia's newly adorned hand and broke into a delighted smile. "Well," she said with satisfaction, "it appears congratulations are in order." News of their engagement spread quickly through Breckenridge, met with general approval and only a few raised eyebrows at the relatively brief duration of their courtship. Mrs. Simmons, after an initially stern lecture about the importance of proper consideration before such life-altering decisions, softened when she saw the genuine happiness the engagement brought Olivia. "Life in the territories doesn't always allow for lengthy courtships," the older woman acknowledged. "And Mr. Forrester has proven himself a man of integrity. I believe your parents would approve, my dear." The school board, upon learning of Olivia's impending marriage, confirmed that her position as assistant teacher remained secure. Married female teachers, while not common in Eastern schools, were accepted in frontier communities where qualified educators were scarce. With both employment and living arrangements settled, they set their wedding date for early October, after the start of the school term, but before winter weather made travel difficult for the circuit riding minister who would perform the ceremony. The intervening weeks passed in a flurry of preparation. Adam worked diligently on the cabin, adding a proper kitchen and expanding the bedroom to create a comfortable if modest home. Olivia divided her time between her duties at the mercantile, preparations for her teaching position, and creating the simple trousseau that her circumstances permitted. Mrs. Wilson and several other women of Breckenridge took Olivia under their collective wing, organizing a chivalry that provided many of the household items she and Adam would need. The community's generosity touched her deeply, reinforcing her growing sense that she had found not just a future husband in Breckenridge, but a true home. As their wedding day approached, Olivia found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this point. Less than 3 months ago, she had been Vernon Pike's prisoner, her future a bleak landscape of continued servitude. Now she stood on the threshold of a life filled with purpose and love, shaped by her own choices rather than another's control. The morning of their wedding dawned clear and crisp, autumn painting the surrounding mountains in brilliant hues of gold and crimson. Olivia dressed in a simple gown of ivory silk that Mrs. Wilson had helped her make, her auburn hair arranged in a style that recalled her mother's in a cherished photograph. The ceremony took place in Breckenridge's small church, filled with well-wishers who had come to respect both the former bounty hunter and the resilient young woman who had so quickly become part of their community. Adam, standing at the altar in a new suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, watched Olivia walk toward him with an expression of such naked adoration that tears threatened to spoil her careful preparations. They spoke their vows clearly, the words to love, honor, and cherish taking on profound meaning for two people who had seen how easily human dignity could be violated. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Adam's kiss was both tender and possessive, a promise of the life they would build together. The celebration afterward at the town hall featured music, dancing, and food contributed by seemingly every household in Breckenridge. Olivia found herself passed from one well-wisher to another, accepted without reservation despite her brief residence in the community. Adam remained close throughout, his hand frequently finding hers as if to reassure himself of her presence. As evening approached, they took their leave amid good-natured teasing and genuine goodwill. The 3-mile journey to their cabin, their home, passed in companionable conversation about the day's events, both still absorbing the reality of their new status as husband and wife. The cabin, when they arrived, had been transformed by Adam's work and Olivia's emerging influence. Curtains hung at the windows, a colorful quilt adorned their bed, and simple furniture crafted by Adam's hands created a welcoming space that reflected both their personalities. A fire had been laid ready in the hearth, and flowers, late blooming wildflowers gathered from their own meadow, stood in a pottery vase on the table. "Welcome home, Mrs. Forrester," Adam said softly as he lifted her across the threshold. Setting her gently on her feet, he maintained his hold, drawing her into an embrace that communicated all the emotion of the day. Olivia returned his kiss with newfound freedom, no longer constrained by Mrs. Simmons' rules or her own cautious heart. That night, as stars wheeled overhead and their small cabin stood strong against the mountain breezes, Olivia and Adam began the intimate journey of marriage with tender discovery and mutual trust. The shadows of Vernon Pike's control receded further with each gentle touch, replaced by the healing power of love freely given and joyfully received. In the years that followed, the cabin expanded into a proper ranch house as their family grew. A son arrived first, William Adam, named for Olivia's father, and his own followed 2 years later by Elizabeth, who inherited her mother's auburn hair and her father's determined spirit. A second son, Thomas, completed their family 3 years after that, surprising them with his arrival during a spring blizzard that necessitated Adam delivering the child himself, while their nearest neighbor rode through the storm for the doctor. Olivia continued teaching until Elizabeth's birth, then devoted herself to their growing family and ranch. When the children were all of school age, she returned to the classroom part-time, finding fulfillment in helping other frontier children develop the love of learning that had sustained her through her darkest days. Adam's small ranch prospered through his determination and skillful management. While never becoming the largest operation in the region, it provided well for their family and allowed them the independence they both valued. Occasionally, when a particularly dangerous fugitive threatened the area, the sheriff still called upon Adam's tracking skills. But these instances became increasingly rare as he built his reputation as rancher rather than bounty hunter. 7 years after their wedding, as they celebrated the harvest with friends and neighbors who had gathered at their expanded home, an unexpected visitor arrived. The rider, dust covered from the trail, pulled up at their gate just as twilight painted the mountains in purple shadow. Olivia, emerging from the house with a fresh platter of corn bread, froze at the sight of the thin figure dismounting with casual arrogance. Though the years had not been kind to him, Vernon Pike's features were unmistakable. Adam materialized at her side, his hand finding hers in silent support. Their guests, sensing tension, quieted their conversations, watching the newcomer with frontier wariness. "Well, well," Vernon called, approaching with the same insincere smile Olivia remembered from countless nights at the Gilded Lily. "Quite a gathering you have here, Mrs. Forrester. Or do you still go by Rose in certain company?" Adam stepped forward, his posture protective without being possessive. "State your business, Pike." Vernon's gaze slid past him to focus on Olivia, taking in her simple but elegant dress, the healthy glow of her skin, the confidence in her posture that had been absent during her years of captivity. "Just passing through on my way to Denver," he replied. "Thought I'd look up an old employee." The casual classification employee rather than captive brought a flush of anger to Olivia's cheeks. Before Adam could respond, she handed him the platter she carried and moved to stand beside him. "Mr. Pike," she acknowledged coolly, "what an unexpected surprise." "Ruby Creek is quite a distance from the Denver road." Vernon shrugged, his practiced charm failing to mask the calculation in his eyes. "I heard rumors that the girl who ran out on her contract had landed on her feet. Curiosity got the better of me." "The contract you claimed was satisfied when I paid you $500, Adam reminded him, his voice level but carrying an unmistakable warning. Vernon waved a dismissive hand. "Ancient history now, surely. I merely wanted to see how my investment turned out." His gaze took in their prosperous homestead, the well-dressed guests, the evidence of success that surrounded them. "Quite well, it appears." Olivia felt the old familiar chill that Vernon's presence had always evoked, but it was different now, a memory of fear rather than its reality. She was no longer the frightened girl trapped in his web of manipulation and false debt. She was Olivia Forrester, wife, mother, teacher, respected member of her community. "Your investment, as you call it, was in human suffering," she said clearly, ensuring their guests heard every word. "You held me against my will for 4 years through lies and threats. There is no place for you here, Mr. Pike, not in my home and not in my life." Vernon's facade of civility slipped, revealing the bitterness beneath. "You'd be nothing without the lessons you learned at the Gilded Lily," he spat. "I made you what you are." Adam tensed beside her, but Olivia placed a restraining hand on his arm. This was her battle to finish. "You tried to break me," she corrected calmly. "You failed. Everything I am today comes from surviving what you did, not because of it. And now you have a choice: leave peacefully, or Sheriff Tanner here," she gestured to one of their guests, who had moved to stand nearby, "will escort you to the edge of town." Vernon's gaze shifted between Olivia's resolute expression, Adam's barely contained anger, and the sheriff's official attention. Whatever scheme had brought him to their door suddenly seemed less viable in the face of such united opposition. "No need for official involvement," he said, retreating toward his horse with forced nonchalance. "I was just passing through, as I said. Good evening to you all." They watched in silence as he mounted and rode away, his figure growing smaller against the darkening sky until he disappeared around a bend in the road. Only then did Olivia release the breath she'd been holding, her hand finding Adam's and squeezing tight. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly, his arm circling her waist in support. Olivia considered the question seriously. The sight of Vernon had indeed disturbed her, bringing back memories of her captivity that she generally kept carefully contained. But his power over her was truly gone had been from the moment Adam spoke those transformative words in the Gilded Lily 7 years ago. "Yes," she replied with genuine certainty. "I'm more than all right." She turned to their guests, who were watching with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. "Please, everyone, continue enjoying yourselves. That man is part of a past that has no hold on me now." The gathering gradually resumed its festive atmosphere, though Olivia noticed Adam remained more vigilant throughout the evening, his gaze occasionally scanning the darkness beyond their lamplit yard. When their guests had departed and their children were tucked safely in bed, he found her on the front porch, gazing at the star-filled sky. "Do you think he'll be back?" Adam asked, joining her at the railing. Olivia shook her head. "No, Vernon only pursues what he believes will profit him." There's nothing for him here. Adam's arm encircled her shoulders, drawing her against his side. You were magnificent, he said softly, facing him like that. 7 years ago, I couldn't even meet his gaze, she reflected. He seemed all-powerful then, like he controlled everything in my world. And now, Olivia smiled, turning in his arms to face him. Now I see him for what he always was, a small, cruel man whose only power came from exploiting others' vulnerability. He has no place in our life, Adam, not anymore. In the moonlight that silvered the porch, she saw answering certainty in her husband's eyes. Vernon Pike had indeed faded to insignificance, a ghost from a past that had shaped but no longer defined her. As if in confirmation, a child's voice called from inside the house. Mama, Papa. Elizabeth had a bad dream, Olivia explained, recognizing their daughter's particular tone. Together they went to comfort their child, the brief shadow cast by Vernon's appearance already receding in the face of their present happiness and future promise. This was their reality now, a home built on mutual respect, children raised in security and love, a community that valued them for their contributions rather than what could be extracted from them. As Adam soothed Elizabeth back to sleep with a story about brave horses and the kind people who cared for them, Olivia stood in the doorway of their daughter's room, overwhelmed with gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. From the darkest captivity had come the brightest freedom, not just freedom from Vernon's control, but freedom to build a life of purpose and joy. You're free starting tonight, Adam had told her that fateful evening in the Gilded Lily. He couldn't have known then how profoundly those words would reshape both their lives, creating a bond that grew stronger with each passing year. In the quiet of their home, with their children sleeping peacefully, and the man she loved by her side, Olivia Forrester embraced the truth that had emerged from her long journey from captivity to liberation. True freedom wasn't just about escape from chains, it was about choosing love, building family, and creating a legacy of compassion that would outlast them both. And in that understanding, she found the deepest peace of all.